You know, in just about every story of creation, there's a single moment where everything changes. In the Qur'an, it all comes down to one command and one refusal. Today, we're going to do a deep forensic analysis of that very first act of disobedience. We're going to deconstruct the argument between God and Iblis to really understand this fundamental conflict between divine authority and our own individual reason.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the command and the refusal that started it all. Then we're going to dig into what kind of command this actually was, which is crucial. From there, we'll see exactly how personal logic went head-to-head with divine text. We'll also ask, who is this command really for? And finally, we'll tackle the biggest question of all. What's the proper relationship between our own minds and divine revelation? Okay, let's jump right in. We're starting at the very beginning of the conflict. A divine command is given, and a refusal is issued. A refusal that literally echoes through all of theology and history. This single moment really sets the stage for everything that's to come.
So where are we getting all this from? Well, our entire analysis is rooted in a really detailed study of Surah Al-Aʿrāf, focusing right on that moment after Adam's creation. The whole thing centers on this one critical question that God asks Iblis, or Satan, right after he openly defies a direct order.
And here it is. This is the question that kicks off the entire drama. Now pay close attention to the specific wording. It's not just, hey, why did you disobey? It's, what prevented you? That word implies there was some kind of barrier, some reason. It's an invitation, really, for Iblis to justify his actions. And that justification, that's where the core of this whole theological argument begins. So before we can even begin to judge the disobedience, we've got to understand the command itself. What was its nature? I mean, was it a suggestion, a law, or was it something else entirely? Making this distinction is absolutely key to understanding the entire framework here. And that brings us to this really critical fork in the road. Was this a creative command? You know, like God saying be and it is? Something that's literally impossible to disobey? Or was it a legislative command, more like a law, which requires a conscious choice from a free being to either follow it or break it? Because really, the answer changes everything.
This chart lays out that core distinction perfectly. On one side, you've got Amr Takwini, the creative formative command. Think of this as the source code of reality, the laws of physics, the orbit of planets. The universe doesn't have a choice in the matter. It simply has to obey. But then on the other side, you've got Amr Tashri'i, the legislative command. And this is totally different. This is directed at beings who have free will. And it's the very foundation for law, morality, reward, punishment, basically for all of accountability.
So here's the kicker. The fact that Iblis could disobey is all the proof we need. It means the command had to be legislative. It was a test, not an act of force. This is what establishes responsibility. Iblis wasn't some puppet on a string. He was an agent who made a conscious, deliberate choice to break a clear, binding law. Okay, so we know the command was a test. Now, let's examine the excuse Iblis gives for failing it. This is where things get really fascinating, because we see two completely different modes of thinking collide. The divine explicit text versus personal logical reasoning. And there's his answer. Look, he doesn't claim he didn't hear it. He doesn't say he misunderstood. No. Instead, he comes back with a full-blown counter-argument. He offers his own justification, a rationale based on his personal logic about the fundamental elements of creation. This table just perfectly captures the philosophical battle happening here. On the left, you've got Nuss, the clear, explicit, divine text. Its authority is meant to be absolute, period. On the right, you have Qiyas, the personal, analogical reasoning that Iblis employs. He creates his own premise that fire is inherently better than clay. And from there, he reaches a conclusion that puts him in direct opposition to God's command. This is the heart of the conflict. And according to the exegesis, this moment is huge. I mean, it's monumental. It's identified as the very first time a created being used their own logical deduction not to understand revelation, but to actively override and oppose it. It established this incredibly dangerous precedent of placing your personal reasoning above a direct, explicit decree from the divine source.
Well, this naturally leads to another big question. Who exactly was this command for? Was it just for those who were present in that one moment? Or did it establish a kind of law for all time? Let's take a look at the scope.
The source digs into this very question. Was this a one-time order?
a specific event in history? Or was it meant to serve as a universal lesson about hierarchy and obedience for everyone who came after, jinn and human alike? The implications are massive either way.
And the answer is pretty nuanced. The source clarifies that the principle of obedience to a divine command is universal and timeless. That applies to everyone. However, the specific act of prostrating to Adam was only for those present in that moment. A really good way to think about it is the command not to eat from the forbidden tree. That was a very specific test for Adam and Eve, but the underlying lesson about obedience applies to all of us.
And all of these threads we've been pulling on, the nature of the command, the justification for refusal, the scope of the order, they all converge on this final, profound topic. What is the proper role of our intellect when it comes face to face with divine revelation?
And this is so important. The source is very clear on this point. This is not an attack on intellect. Reason is a gift from God. The fundamental error, the first sin, wasn't using intellect. It was misusing it, setting it up as a judge with veto power over divine command instead of using it as the tool that was meant to be, a tool for understanding that command.
So right here, the source defines the proper role of al-aql, the intellect. It's not meant to be a creator of truth on its own. Think of it more like a sophisticated receiver. Its job is to take in the signal of revelation, to process it, to understand what it means, and then to figure out the best way to act on it.
This gives us such a powerful metaphor to grasp the relationship. Revelation is the path. It's already there, laid out. The intellect is the lamp you carry with you. And the lamp's purpose isn't to create a new path out of thin air. Its purpose is to illuminate the one that already exists so you can walk it safely. And this leaves us with the central, thought-provoking question at the heart of this entire story. When does the person holding the lamp start to believe they are the source of the light itself? When do they believe their lamp is so bright that they don't need the path anymore and they can forge their own? That's the danger this entire theological event warns us about.